So you're looking at my copy of Black Gold by Marguerite Henry. That's a book about the horse Black Gold. It originally came out in 1957. Marguerite Henry was a children's book author. Most of her books were about horses. I think her most famous book, from what I understand, was Misty of Chincoteague, about the Chincoteague horses. But her other works included this book about Black Gold, the 1924 Kentucky Derby winner, whose owner, Rosa Hoots, was from Oklahoma and a member of the Osage Nation. Now, I actually hadn't heard about Black Gold. I don't know if I've ever heard about him, really, until last few years. But I wanted to learn a little bit more than just, things I'd, read from the Wikipedia article and stuff like that. So I decided to go ahead and buy this book. This is probably about a 5th grade reading level book. And it's done in a narrative based on a true story fashion. Tells the whole story about the husband of Black Gold's owner and how he owned Black Gold's dam or mother, You See It, who was a racehorse. And did I like it? Yes, I liked the book. How good of a book was it? Probably depends a little bit on how interested you are in the subject matter. If you like racing, you want to learn a little bit more about Black Gold and the history and such, you'll probably like it more. For me, being an Oklahoman and living in the next county over from where Rosa Hoots lived and only about an hour away from the property that was her ranch, the most compelling parts of the book were things that were Oklahoma or Osage Nation related. For instance, there's one chapter where Rosa talks about this table in her house. Let me just go ahead and read the excerpt from the book on this one, actually. This is Rosa talking in the book on page 68 of my edition. My father, Ogee's captain, was tribal counselor and interpreter for the white chiefs. He brought this table on that long trail of tears from his old home in Kansas to the new Indian reservation here. It was on this table, quote, Rosa stood up now as if she were her father. Quote, on this table, she pronounced, a treaty was signed under the elms, a treaty that said each headright Indian of the Osage tribe shall share equally with his brothers all mineral rights to the land of the Osage Nation. I don't really have another source to verify all these specifics with, but that's what the excerpt from the book is, and I tried to read it verbatim as much as possible. So, also, according to the book, when Rosa ships You See It, Black Gold's dam, off to the horse farm in Kentucky to be bred with his sire, Black Tony, she writes a short letter to the Colonel E. R. Bradley, Idle Hour Farm, Lexington, Kentucky. In her letter she writes, the oil flows on the land of the Osage Nation. We can pay. In other words, telling him we got money coming in, we'll be able to pay the bill for this. Now, obviously, this book isn't written like a graduate student might write a thesis citing a bunch of sources and all that. Some might call it historical fiction based on a true story. But I would say, I don't know if everything in the book happened exactly as described, but for the most part, it feels very real, and there are some things in it that seem very accurate to me. For instance, the chapter about Black Gold's Derby win and how the race went on, and how he was given those roses afterwards, or they put the roses on him, and the jockey rode him, and how Rosa stood in the stands. That all seems to actually match up pretty well, near as I can tell, with the photos I've seen and the old-timey black and white footage you can find about the Kentucky Derby online from the 1924 Kentucky Derby. So, now there's one particular chapter in the book where I think even if things happen the way the author says they happen, she definitely puts a very positive spin on everything, and that's chapter 7, the claiming race, about when Rosa Hoot's husband, who died before Black Gold was born, entered You See It at a claiming race in Juarez, Mexico, and the horse was supposed to have been sold at the end of the race, but he refused to hand her over to the buyer, and according to this account, even pulled a gun on him and chased him off, and thus he and the horse were banned from the track and banned from racing. Although, when I read this chapter and considering where it happened, I think he and his horse are pretty lucky to have made it out of there alive. Now, the most surprising thing I learned, according to the book, that I didn't expect the account of Black Gold's life to be this way. I was under the impression he was actually born at the ranch in Skiatook, but this book indicates he was born in Kentucky at the horse farm. In fact, I'll put this out there. There is a museum exhibit, a local museum exhibit, which says he was born in Skiatook, which appears to not be accurate. But we're just going to leave it at that. However, it would make more sense that this horse, bred to be a racehorse, bred to be a champion, would be born at a horse farm where he could continue his high-end, high level of training after being born. And even though Rosa owned that ranch throughout her life, she owned it until her death, it doesn't appear that Black Gold, according to this book, ever really spent any time at the ranch, which I think is, in a way, a shame. It would have been nice if, after he'd been retired from racing, and he'd come back to the ranch where, her people could visit him and see him at his home, at the home in Skiatook. But that wasn't actually how it all went down, it appears. He had his racing career, and then, he was retired for a while, went to stud for a while, but wasn't very fertile. And then he had some hoof problems. They healed him up enough to try to get him racing again. And the story kind of has a sad ending. His last race was as a 6-year-old in New Orleans, and he suffered an injury and had to be euthanized at the track. And he is buried in the infield of the Fairgrounds racetrack in New Orleans. Also, it is worth noting the fairgrounds in New Orleans is hosting the Black Gold Stakes, a race they hold each year in Black Gold's honor, on Saturday, March 2nd, 2024, at the Fairgrounds Race Course in New Orleans. And it's a big race they hold every year for the 3-year-olds. And according to my source on the internet, post time is 5:17 p.m. Central Time. So as a Kentucky Derby winner, this made Black Gold famous and well-known and well-liked throughout the country. However, it appears there were 3 states that especially held Black Gold in high esteem. 1, Oklahoma, because his owner was an Oklahoman from Osage County, Oklahoma, and a member of the Osage Nation. 2, Louisiana, home of New Orleans, because that's where he started his racing career, and his frequent jockey, J.D. Mooney, the one who rode him to victory in the Kentucky Derby, was also from New Orleans, and of course, unfortunately, but it has to be noted, his last race was held in New Orleans, and he is buried in New Orleans. 3rd would be Kentucky, because he was a Kentucky Derby winner, and he was also born in Kentucky. So thank you for watching. If you are in New Orleans or near New Orleans Saturday, March 2nd, I probably won't be, unfortunately, but I think you should try to attend the Black Gold Stakes. Also, it's worth noting this is when the Kentucky Derby rolls around in May, it will be the 100th anniversary of 100 years since Black Gold's victory. So, thanks for watching.